As Christian said, my name is Jason Callery. I'm a missionary executive at the Johns Hopkins Applied Physics Lab. At APL, my team has the charter to dream up bold new space missions and then implement and execute them on cost and on schedule. This is something that we've done very successfully over our history, especially for NASA space science missions. The true success of that, those missions and that implementation is due to this community. These are international partnerships, and they're partnerships where commercial space is heavily involved in developing and designing those missions. So the last time I was up on stage at an IAC meeting was a couple years ago in Paris in 2022, and we had a great opportunity to bring together multiple international missions in a highlight lecture. NASA and the European Space Agency each had their leading scientists up on stage to talk about extreme exploration, how we trailblaze around our sun, the lifeblood of our solar system, and expand scientific discovery and exploration. So it was a lot of fun. It was really, really wonderful to do that. So really happy to be back here at IAC to introduce a new panel. And so it's been a couple years. It's a slightly different world. IAC has gotten a little bit bigger. If you walk through the exhibit hall right now, you can see not only new spacefaring nations with exhibits, but you can see countries aspiring to be new spacefaring nations to have exhibits. And that's really, really wonderful to see. IAC is a fantastic symposium, as you've already seen from the first day and a half here. And it's also the premier symposium in the world that brings together so many different nations to tackle the big challenges in space exploration. And that's exactly what this panel is about. It's about one of the biggest challenges that faces us for the future of space exploration. The title of our panel today is Learning to Live on Another World, the International Community's Return to the Moon. I'm going to lead off this panel with some opening remarks and also introduce the panelists. We have another moderator as well who's going to pick the ball up from me at the end, and he's going to close out the session with discussions, question and answer, as well as some closing remarks. Please submit questions to the panel. You'll see a Slido QR code come up multiple times throughout the presentation. And so you can submit questions, and you can also upvote questions that have been submitted, and we'll try and get through as many of them as possible. Let me quickly introduce our panelists. So first, our second moderator is Ben Greenhagen. Ben is a planetary scientist at the Johns Hopkins Applied Physics Lab. He's been the principal investigator of many missions and instruments, and he's also the chair of NASA's Lunar Exploration Analysis Group. Our first panelist is Frank DeWin, who needs no introduction. He's the European Space Agency's first astronaut to command a space mission and currently the head of the European Astronaut Center. Our second panelist is Najud Moranci from NASA headquarters. Najud is the Deputy Associate Administrator for Strategy and Architectures in the Exploration Systems Development Mission Directorate. So she's going to give us a NASA perspective, and you're in for a treat with a beautiful presentation with many awesome slides and videos. Next, we're going to hear from JAXA with Masaki Fujimoto. Congratulations, Masaki, on your recent promotion. So Masaki is now the Deputy Director General of JAXA, and he also oversees JAXA's ISAS program, which is kind of the scientific institution of JAXA, I would say. It was very important for us when we put this panel together to also have private industry representation on the panel, so we're excited to welcome Will Coogan. Will is the chief engineer for Firefly Aerospace Blue Ghost lander, which had a very successful mission to the moon earlier this year. And then finally, it was very important for us to also try and highlight some of the exploration goals and lunar exploration goals from the Australian Space Agency. So we're excited to have Arvind Ramana as one of our panelists for today. Okay, let's go ahead and get started. So let me start with this beautiful picture of planet Earth. I love looking at this picture. I call it our blue marble. The Earth is a world that's very hospitable to life and very hospitable to all of the creations that that human beings have made on it. Just look at Sydney, right? Walk around this harbor, look at the architecture, look at the buildings, look at the infrastructure that we've built. It's just incredibly inspirational and exciting. And we do this to thrive, to compete, to have fun, to innovate, to advance exploration. And Sydney, of course, is just one example of that. If you look across the world, you can see so many different examples. And so let me now pause and switch to a different image, and that's an image of our moon. And you can see that it looks very different, and we don't have that same infrastructure on that moon. We don't have cities and colonies on that moon. And to me, that's a little surprising, right? The moon is the most accessible extraterrestrial object to Earth. And so, today it's at the nexus of a transformation in space. You see expansive commercialization with a lunar focus. You see mega constellations that are being developed and deployed at a record pace. And human exploration is extending beyond low Earth orbit to the moon and even beyond. You can see how important the moon has become as a destination just scanning around IAC, right? Just over the last couple of years, multiple nations and multiple commercial companies have attempted to land on the moon. This includes China, Russia, India, Japan, Israel, and the US, and in fact, some of them multiple times. A great example of the success of this exploration by the worldwide community is the Chang'e 6 mission, where China was successfully able to grab a sample from a never before explored region of the moon, the far side of the moon, and bring it back. And for those that haven't seen it, that sample is actually at their exhibit at IAC, and so you can get up close and personal with it. These new organizations, new space companies, new industry are deploying new technologies on the moon. This is a new generation of exploration, new spacefaring nations and industries going back with a common vision, and it really paves the way for humanity's return to the moon. But if we back up a second, I wanted to show a picture of the International Space Station. And I want to show this because I believe that this exploration of the moon that we're doing right now, it represents an inflection point for human history. I like this picture because it's a picture of two NASA astronauts, both women, who are operating in space, performing a spacewalk. I have two daughters, okay? During their entire lives, my daughters know that human beings have been living in space. They take for granted that we can do scientific experiments in space, that we can build things, we can do spacewalks. And so for them, it's just second nature. It's something that they take for granted. As we look forward, and as I think about their kids are going to be living in a generation where humans have always been living on the moon. And that's our challenge today, right? Our challenge is, this is how we will be defined in this period. It's whether or not we can take the next steps in humankind's exploration and learn to live on another world, and moreover, learn to sustain that presence with the natural resources of the moon. So that includes developing and deploying technology such as mobility on the moon so we can explore it. NASA acting administrator Sean Duffy yesterday talked about the importance of fission surface power so we can power colonies and our devices and our infrastructure on the moon. It also includes a push to explore some of those hard-to-reach areas of the moon, the extreme access. And in many cases, some of the most precious resources on the moon are in those extreme access areas. And so we really need to be able to get to them, and we need to be able to use them so we can turn them into fuel and oxygen and water and sustain that presence. And of course, just like we've done on Earth, just like we've done in Sydney, we want to be able to build. We want to be able to manufacture on the moon. So that requires developing landing pads, developing infrastructure, developing habitats and shelters. And so my summary is that I believe that we can realize this dream. I think we have the will, I think we have the funding, we have the collaborations across the worldwide community, and we also have the ideas and the creativity. The key is to have a sense of urgency, to work together, and to make this happen now, to really go. So to talk about how we're working together and to give you an example of some of the innovation and exploration in the European Space Agency for learning to live on another world, I'll now turn it over to my colleague, Frank. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Jason. It's a pleasure to be here. Indeed, working together, living off the planet is something that we are doing today, as you said, on the International Space Station, but also on the Chinese space station. We have permanent human presence in space since now at least 26 years, I think, or 25 years that we have it now, that we will actually celebrate. But it's time indeed to make the next step. I think since the 60s, we have been turning around our planet. We have been exploring low Earth orbit. We are now at a stage that this can be more and more handed over to the commercial world instead of being mastered by the space agencies. But indeed, we need to make the next step, and we need to go to the moon. And we need to go forward to the moon, not just to plant a flag or to be the first, but we need to go there to sustain, to learn, to do science, to work, to operate, just like we have done in the International Space Station. And once we have mastered that, then we can, I think, take the next step. And Europe is, of course, committed to do that. The first step that we do in Europe is, of course, in international cooperation with our colleagues from around the world, but especially in the Artemis program. Europe is present in the Artemis program as of Artemis 1. We are building the European service module, which is basically propelling the Orion space vehicle towards the moon and making sure that the astronauts can come back safely to Earth. And we are all looking forward, of course, to the Artemis 2 mission that will hopefully launch beginning next year sometime. But the ESM mission was already very successful, the Artemis 1 mission, and the ESM performed excellent during that first mission. We have actually delivered already the third service module to NASA, and this year we will deliver, hopefully, as well the fourth. So we are really on a track to make these flights more and more regularly towards the lunar environment. And of course, this is part also of our gateway infrastructure that we are building together with NASA, with JAXA, with CSA, and also with the UAE. So also there, as you see, the nations that are participating are expanding. And our contribution is linked, first of all, to the habitation module, which is the lunar HiHab, the communication, which is very important, the lunar link, which hopefully will launch in a couple of years, and then the lunar view, the ERM-XL, which will allow for refueling of the gateway, because the gateway is there initially for 15 years, but as we have seen with the International Space Station, once you have an infrastructure and the infrastructure is used and very successful, normally we intend to use it longer. And so in order to intend to use it longer, of course, we need to have additional resources and refueling capability. And then, of course, we look forward to launching these elements with Artemis 4, Artemis 5, and then eventually Artemis 6. But of course, we don't want to stay just around the moon, as Jason clearly said. We need to go down to the surface. We need to be able to live and explore the surface of the moon. We need to be able to build there. And for that, we have in ESA divided a number of phases in which we want to move forward with the European content. Again, in international cooperation, it's very clear that we want to work together with partners from all over the world. But we also want to have our own European objectives, and we want to be able to move this forward, to move the European technology, the knowledge of Europe forward in this area, and then bring this to the table as an international partner. So the first phase is between now and the 2030s, is basically to de-risk the phase 2 that we will have, to flight-proof some critical technologies, to learn about the resources that are there on the moon, to learn about the environment, which is very critical because, of course, if you want to operate safely astronauts on the lunar surface, you need to characterize the environment, you need to characterize the area in which they will work so that it's also useful, but that can also be safe. And those critical technologies were already mentioned. For sure, there is power. Without power, you don't do anything. Today, we are not capable to survive the lunar night. If we want one day to permanently live on the moon, like my grandkids, not my kids anymore, but my grandkids, I have, or their kids maybe will see that happening. Then, of course, we need to have extended power and night survivability. So this is certainly something that we will work in. If you want to explore, you need to be mobile. So surface mobility is certainly an element that we will de-risk. And finally, as well, you need to be able to communicate, to navigate. So this is also part of our first, I would say, de-risking activities and understanding that we will do. And then we will take the next step. We will start building. Building is very important. If you want to explore permanently, you cannot just bring everything there, land, and come back and do this over and over again. It will not work. You need to be able to build up infrastructure that you can reuse. And this is the next step that we will do. And of course, with everything that's happening in the area of robotics, in the area of artificial intelligence, we need to have, of course, these advanced capabilities so that initially the humans do not need to be present to do all the building and to do all the work, but that we can automate this in a very good manner. And then, of course, eventually we will also want to have our European astronauts living and working on the moon. That's probably a little bit later, beyond the 2030s. And then we need to develop, together with our international partner, of course, permanent research and facilities like we have today, the International Space Station. And then progressively, we can then go in building a lunar economy, just like we have done with the ISS, which was an institutional platform, but that we have more and more used now in the commercial environment with commercial crew, with commercial cargo, with private astronaut missions, and that will go on now in the commercial LEO destinations. And so also there on the moon, we see that this evolution will go into that same direction from the ESA side. So what are the pivotal missions that we will do still in this decade, in the next 5 years, I would say? Our flagship program is, of course, Argonaut. It's a lander that will bring about 1.5 tons of cargo capability to the moon. And then we need to define the payloads that we want to use on that cargo lander. And this mission is scheduled to land in the 2030s. Prospect is a drill that we will fly quite early on the IM-4 mission, together with some commercial Eclipse missions, where we will look already for resources and try to characterize resources on the surface of the moon. And then, as I said, we will launch with this, our ministerial conference that is happening in a couple of months from now, where we will get the funding for the next 3 years. We have launched a new initiative, which is called a robotic precursor mission, where we will test exactly what we will need in order to go to the next phase, which is survivability. Again, power is key. Mobility. If you can't navigate, if you can't drive, if you can't go other places, you will not be successful. And then, of course, you also need to have dexterity to be able to examine in the first place, but then later on to build. And this is something also that we want to present to our ministers in our ministerial conference now in CM25 in November. We hope to have success there, and we hope to see you in a couple of years, where we do not only present view graphs, but where we can present you actual videos of actual missions that have landed and technology that we have demonstrated. Thank you very much.
Hi, good afternoon. I'm glad to be here. I wanted to talk a little bit first, because when we're talking about learning to live and work on another planet or another world, that begins today. Our mission, Artemis II, is preparing to launch no later than April, and I say that intentionally because our goal could be as early as February to be launching the first cruise outside low Earth orbit in over 50 years. So it has never happened in my lifetime and the many of you here today, so this is a very exciting time for us because the reality of going to the moon is now. We used to call these baby pictures, but I think we're taking graduation pictures now of all of our hardware. The crew, Victor, that's his call signs, Ike. Christina and Jeremy are ready to go. They are through most of their training. They practice all the procedures, the teams in mission control, all of the vehicle is being stacked, all of the hardware is at the Kennedy Space Center, and Orion will very shortly be put on top of the SLS rocket along with the European Space Agency service module. So we are very excited because the Artemis II mission is getting very close, and I hope you all follow along with us in the spring. But it's not just Artemis II. We have made a lot of progress, and these are just a few pictures for Artemis III as well. Orion is being assembled at the Kennedy Space Center also for Artemis 3. Our partners with SpaceX are doing all of their launch demonstrations and the planning for their human landing system, the Starship, that we plan to use to explore the moon. So there is much going on, and when we talk about this endeavor, a lot of efforts are happening simultaneously. So we're really looking forward to it, including beginning to train. In that bottom picture, you can see the crew in the Neutral Buoyancy Lab in Houston, Texas, practicing spacewalks and EVAs on the surface of the moon. All of the training, the geological trainings going on at various locations around the world. So this is really an exciting time because when we talk about living on another world, we are really advancing rapidly to that reality. In terms of the other world and our nearest neighbor, this is a view of the South Pole of the moon. The red dot is right on the rim of Shackleton Crater where the South Pole is. And this is the perspective that the astronauts will have in the future. So when we talk about the South Pole, there are many advantages. The lighting can have continuous periods for up to 6 months in certain locations. The potential for water trapped in the regolith. All of these things are reasons to go to the South Pole, but it presents a number of challenges. The extreme darkness, the terrain. But being able to explore, a lot of the exploration comes with understanding the environment, and these are the systems we need to tackle it. As Frank mentioned, the mobility systems, power systems, all of those things together will enable our exploration and the sustained operations of human on the South Pole. So as we look to do this, we are looking to make sure we continue to explore with partners, establishing the capabilities. So Artemis 3 is just the first of what will be many missions to come to explore not just the South Pole, but build out systems to sustain our astronauts and crews for the future. And as you can see, understanding when you can see the Earth and the sun and all of these factors together will be vitally important. And so it's a matter of perspective as we do this, what is important, and you can see this Earth pop back up here again. You know, the first time I started showing people these videos, they told me the Earth was rotating backwards, and I had to point out that that was their perspective. So it is very different when we explore the South Pole, and understanding that world for our astronauts is critical. Because the most important thing in our exploration is the human. The human is the center of our exploration plan. So being able to do this safely, and the systems they will need, not just for the moon, but Mars exploration, it's just building the technologies and the capabilities to make the human mission valuable. I would posit the most important resource in any exploration endeavor is the crew and the crew time in the environment. The more we can make the crew successful to do the geologic exploration, to do the human research, to understand medical conditions, that's the value of the crew being there. It's not turning bolts to replace hardware. So advancing our capabilities for higher reliability, less maintenance, robotic, Earth independence, all of these features and the technologies that we need is to make sure the crew mission is not just safe and we can safely return them, but effective. So these are the challenges we have in front of us, and those will be the things about learning to live in on another world, particularly to understand how that works on the moon, so that when we send our astronauts farther into the galaxy and onto Mars, where they won't have the benefit of real-time mission control support, they can also achieve the objectives at even greater distances to continue humanity's journey into the stars. So with that, I'd like to turn it over to my colleague, Misaki. Thank you.
Okay, hello, I'm Masaki Fujimoto from JAXA. These 4 panels shows our recent activities. We did return samples back from asteroid Ryugu in Woomera in Australia. And then we are preparing a forward sample return mission, MMX, and we landed on the moon, SLIM mission, and then we're preparing our own way of landing on Mars. So let me tell you about what we did with the SLIM mission. So this diagram shows the last 20 minutes before the landing. From the altitude of 15 kilometers above the surface of the moon, we do the reverse thrusting. And then we go all the way down to the 50 meters above the surface. And during this period, we performed image-based navigation, which is critical to perform pinpoint landing. And at the altitude of 50 meters, the precision of landing the difference between where Slim was and where Slim wanted to be. That was only 3 meters. So it really was a pinpoint landing. And at the altitude of 50 meters, we think when the Slim was hovering above the surface, we think our pinpoint landing technology was demonstrated. But so it's only 50 meters left. It's only 40 seconds left, but something went wrong, and we ended up in a contingency situation. And the spacecraft ended up in this acrobatic orientation on the surface, but still, it was a soft landing. So we landed on the moon safely. And it's the smallest lander on the moon. The smallest lander on the moon performed the pinpoint landing. And if you remember the picture in the previous panel, that was taken by these 2 small robots deployed from the lander, which was in the contingency. But still, the team kept the option of releasing the 2 robots to the surface, even in that critical moment, which was a correct decision, I think. And these 2 small robots on the surface, one of them weighs only 250 grams, and the other one weighs only 2 kilograms. But still, both of them performed autonomously on the surface and took that picture, which I think is really iconic. So I think SLIM mission has demonstrated the beauty of small and smart missions, and I think that's the line we're trying to pursue. But then, what are the lessons we learned from this SLIM mission? I want to go through 3 major items. One of them is about the pinpoint landing. So pinpoint landing, does it matter? I'm showing you this movie just to show how much it matters. The purple dot in the middle is where we landed, and you wouldn't want to land there unless you have the pinpoint landing technology. And we wanted to land there because there are rocks that seems to be excavated from the deep interior of the moon. So if you go there, and if we land right next to it, and inspect the rocks closely, we can learn about the deep interior of the moon. So scientifically, it's of high value, and that's why, and the study is ongoing now. So, and that's the reason why we want to do the pinpoint landing. But in any way, I hope this movie tells you, if you really want to go there, you need a pinpoint landing. I hope you are convinced. And then, another thing is that because of this, the last 40-second thing, because it was in the contingency mode in the last 40 seconds, it did not land in the orientation it was supposed to. It was supposed to land in this orientation, as if it's like a clinching onto the surface of the moon. And you may understand that the SLIM doesn't have any landing legs. There has been a big technical thinking behind this design. Because SLIM is such a small lander, we thought it's not cost effective to bring bulky landing legs together with this lander. So we thought, instead of having a legs, why not make a legless landing to the surface? So we call it a 2-stage landing. I wouldn't go into the details, but it's really like clinching onto the surface and changing the orientation depending on the slope, the orientation of the slope on the surface. But anyway, we thought this is the safe way of landing, even in a slope region with a small lander. But we didn't manage to demonstrate this technology because of this, last 40-second thing. But so, do we want to have another mission to demonstrate this, or do we like purchase a commercial transportation service to do lunar landing in a different way in the future? That's a discussion ongoing now. And then the final issue is about the synergy between human exploration and robotic missions. So JAXA also has a plan to contribute this pressurized rover to the Artemis program. It's really a big rover. But at the same time, we don't think, we means like my institute, who thinks good at small and smart mission, don't think or don't want to think that big mission take it all. So I think there should be a synergy between smaller missions and the bigger missions, or synergy between human exploration and robotic explorations. And what the panel you see on the right-hand side is when Catherine, the Australian astronaut, visited our institute, we let her play the the small robot, the small robot that did its job on the surface of the moon. But it's a toy version of that robot, but we let her walk the small robot in our institute as if she's operating a small robot on the surface of the moon. But that was a fun event, but still, I think the message I wanted to send is that we should be more serious about synergy between human exploration and small robot exploration. So with that, I want to ask Will from Firefly to come to the stage.
Today I'm going to be telling you about Firefly Aerospace's Blue Ghost Mission 1, which on March 2nd of this year became the first commercial vehicle to softly touch down upright on another planetary body. We launched in mid-January. There we are separating from the SpaceX launch vehicle. We orbited the Earth for about a month, and during this period of time, we're of course conducting payload science operations. But in addition to that, this time was really critical to making sure all of our systems were operating nominally and that we had correctly calibrated our propulsion system before a critical maneuver, namely lunar orbit insertion, during which you have about 20 minutes to complete that maneuver or you're leaving the Earth-Moon system. So there we are in our perigee around the Earth, and then shortly here you'll see that lunar orbit insertion maneuver. This is fast-forwarded a bit, coming up on the Moon, and then we perform a maneuver at just over 100 kilometers altitude, right there, and go into a highly elliptical lunar orbit. Once in lunar orbit, we continue orbiting the Moon for about 2 weeks. We do some phasing maneuvers to make sure we're over the landing site at the right time. In addition to that, we're calibrating our vision navigation system, which is critical to that precision landing, at least in terms of how we've architected our vehicle. Here we fast forwarded a bit to the descent. We've actually are quite a bit through descent here. We are beginning our pitch over, and you kind of see that on the top right as the angle of the Moon changes with respect to the camera. If you look at the two images on the left, you're looking down the sides of the vehicle. The top one is looking kind of down the north side. The bottom one is looking down the south side of the vehicle. On the bottom right, you can see the sun has just started rising on our landing site. So that's going to be to the east. It's 3 to 4 degrees above the horizon. So very similar illumination conditions to what you're going to see at a lunar pole. And then in the top right screen, you will occasionally see a white disk. There it is, coming above that antenna. That is the Earth. And so that is looking pretty much due west. And we'll see one more video shortly of the due west portion of this. Now you'll see that even though this is landing in Amari, which from Earth and even from the Lunar Reconnaissance Orbiter looks very smooth and benign, as we get closer, you start to see that there's no smooth, benign spot on the Moon. It's craters all the way down, and it's very difficult, at least to the human eye, to tell how high up you are at this point. Just you get lower, and it's kind of like a fractal. You start to see new craters. And it continues to look like that until about 20 meters, and you'll very soon start to see some plume surface interactions. We've turned off our main engine at this point. We are just firing 8 RCS thrusters developed in-house at Firefly. And you'll see a little bit of a null along the bottom where each of the engines are. Just hold tight for a moment. And there you start to see the translucent spots are where the engines are, and you can see right between them, the area right between the engines. And if you look in the right images, you'll see the dust building up on the horizon there, and you'll also see how quickly it settles. Right there, as soon as the engines turn off, you start to see the dust settle very quickly. And you'll see one more video of just the final moments, also looking west, but in this one you can see the silhouette of the vehicle as it comes down. You can also see the knolls between the plumes. And there we are on March 2nd, safely on the lunar surface. Okay, also during descent, we had a number of payloads operating, including the Scalps cameras. They had 6 different cameras operating, but looking under the vehicle to try and look at that plume surface interaction. So as gentle a video as that last one was, showing how softly we landed on the surface, this one's looking underneath, and you see it's much more violent than the last video. You'll actually also see that the cameras get covered in dust, And the top left one there is actually very difficult to see from. We actually did figure out a way of clearing that camera and all the cameras on the bottom of the vehicle. Right after landing, we got the high gain array going. You'll see that deploy here shortly and started getting 10 megabits per second down. That's roughly HD video. We deployed a robotic arm to the surface and collected samples with this PlanetVac payload. And you see that just cleared the camera lens. When that nitrogen started flowing, it cleared all the lenses on the bottom of the vehicle. And that particular one was special because we actually got to have the Honeybee team on site with us, and that was their baby. So they got to see that video real time as it came down. We also had an electrodynamic dust shield that used electrostatic forces to clear dust off of surfaces. Dust is very problematic for things like radiators and solar arrays that you need uncovered during surface ops. We drilled about 1 meter into the lunar surface with another Honeybee payload. This one here is measuring thermal gradients under the surface. Thermal turns out to be a large challenge at the moon. We also had a lunar magnetotelluric sounder out of the Southwest Research Institute that shot these probes out in 4 different cardinal directions, as well as a mast about 3 meters above the top deck of the vehicle. There you see the mast going up, and that's looking all the way down into the lunar mantle. There's also a solar eclipse, of course, while we were on the moon. And then we operated through the surface mission and 4 hours into the lunar night to try and capture the glow of lunar dust levitating on the horizon as is suspected to do. I'll say that we have not confirmed that. We've sent these videos on to NASA and they're evaluating. So all told, 2 weeks operating on the surface of the moon, 4 years from contract award to on the lunar surface, a little over $100 million, including launch for this mission. And 10 payloads that were operated successfully and met all of their mission objectives. So really groundbreaking science at an industry-changing cost. And then I just want to close by saying that there are 4 people from Firefly here. We all have these mission patches, so if you'd like one, please find us in the next few days. And with that, I will hand it off to Arvin.
Hello, everybody. It's a tough act to follow after a high-definition lunar landing video. I'll try my best. I would like to acknowledge the Gadigal of the Eora Nation, the traditional custodians of the lands on which we meet, and pay my respect to elders past and present. Australia has been a proud space nation, with history in Moon to Mars extending all the way back to the Apollo program. In 2020, we joined the Artemis Accords as founding signatories. And the Australian Space Agency began our task of identifying a roadmap for our focus areas or priority areas when it comes to space and space-based robotics. And what you see on the screen are the 6 focus segments, which we defined as Australia's priorities, based on our expertise and based on our heritage as a resources and mining nation. So the 6 areas of priority: remote operations and interoperability of systems, analog facilities and testing facilities that Australia can offer, our robotic platforms and our terrestrial robotics expertise, and our expertise in mineral exploration that translates directly to in-situ resource utilization, and what we call as foundational services, enduring services that countries such as Australia can provide to larger science exploration missions. So that document is available online if anyone wants to refer to it. These priority areas also tie in nicely towards Australia's goals when it comes to space exploration and science that you can see on the screen. What I'm going to do today is take you on a journey towards discussing some of the Australian missions that will land on the moon, on the surface, or on the low Earth orbit with close priorities to the NASA Moon to Mars architecture. And these missions are one of a kind for a country like Australia, and I will explain how. So we have been developing under what we call as the Australian Moon to Mars initiative, several programs and several projects funded through the government. These are unique in a sense that these are not institutional missions. These are developed by the industry, funded by the government, and developed by the industry with close priorities to government's objectives. What you see on the screen are multiple missions that I'm going to talk about. Optical ground stations developed by University of Western Australia and the Australian National University to provide optical to Orion link and links to various low Earth orbit and lunar missions. Universal payload tracking systems developed by Enable Aerospace to carry payloads with instrumentation to monitor the payloads as they go towards a journey to the moon. Virtual reality tools by a company called Ray Tracer to develop mission assurance systems, docking systems, and several other simulations to exercise them before it's actually carried out on the moon. Lunaria 1 and their biological modules to look at seeds, their germination, and lichens and their germination and their characteristics on the moon, on the lunar soil. Instruments developed by ANU and an organization called CEA for photonics and optics stabilization. Advanced navigations, working very closely with Intuitive Machines to provide lunar laser rangefinders for landing assistance systems. Fleet Space and their ambient noise tomography systems to look at the subsurface characteristics of the moon for scientific purposes. Quantex, who's developing quantum clocks. And University of Melbourne, operation systems and radiation-hardened electronics for lunar and Mars survival. And finally, Miriota, who's developing software-defined radios to develop various communications architectures on the moon, including search and rescue for astronauts. Moving forward, this, of course, is our biggest project. We call it the flagship mission, the lunar rover. We call it the rover. If you haven't got the name, RU stands for kangaroo, and we named it creatively as the rover. We call it the boldest adventure yet. It is because it is. It's a 20-kilogram class rover developed by a consortium of over 20 Australian organizations, called as the ELO2 consortium, led by EPE Oceania and the Lunar Outpost Oceania. And they are developing a lunar rover for providing foundational services capabilities on the moon. The rover also carries a NASA sensor on it to look at various regolith characterization technologies. But the primary objective is for demonstration of foundation services. Australia's expertise in remote operations, Australia's abilities in AI and autonomous navigation, and we're going to try it out on the moon, give it a go, see how it goes, gained flight heritage for our lunar heritage for our subsystems, and use that as a basis for our future missions and exploration goals. As you might have noticed, these are not traditional space companies. All of them that I talked about, most of them that I talked about. These are all companies from adjacent sectors and adjacent industries that we have been able to kind of bring them into space. Agencies were talking about how to attract private investment into space and how to attract adjacent sectors into space, and that's the luxury we've had. Australia started off with that, and we've had a good success in bringing them all into space, and we just hope that a number of these missions and their journeys are successful so that we can continue the momentum and keep our contributions to our international partners ongoing. In this concept, we created what we call as Team Artemis Australia. So Australia's contribution to the Artemis program may not be huge pressurized rovers or anything like that, but niche capabilities that tie in nicely to the NASA Moon to Mars architecture. Nuju's already talked about it. So our missions, our projects, and our funding are aligned to the concepts on operations, remote operations, scientific payloads, transhab, and infrastructure. Moving quickly and talking specifically on infrastructure, we have been kind of collecting our infrastructure capabilities and Australia's offerings to our international partners and how we can come together to support international missions. And I mean, there's a lot on the screen, but in summary, these are strategic investments and strategic projects all across Australia, highlighting various capabilities, starting all the way from design to testing to analogs to ground stations to tracking stations, and more importantly, launch and return facilities that Australia can leverage from its geographic advantages. And finally, putting this all into one big picture timeline, when humanity returns to the moon, the Australian space sector will be ready with our payloads, with our abilities, with our workforce, with our skills, and with our facilities to support the bigger picture, humanity's return to the moon, Mars, and beyond. Thank you.
Not quite closing yet. All right, so now we're going to move on to the questions and answers. So thank you all that have been using Slido to get your questions in or upvoting other people's questions. There's some good questions on here. So we're going to start off. I'm going to suggest an initial response from a panelist, but I encourage other panelists to jump in at any point if you have anything else you'd like to add. So the first question is, what ethical challenges do you foresee regarding sending humans to the moon and beyond with our limited knowledge of the long-term healthcare risk? Frank, would you mind taking that one?
Thanks for the question. I hope you can hear me. The mic is working? Yeah, okay, thanks. Yes, of course, we have to look to a number of risks for our crew on the lunar surface. First of all, the lunar environment, already if we fly to Gateway, will be the first step, is the radiation environment, which is quite different from here on Earth. We have, of course, done some moon landings in the past, but it were short missions. So if you think about longer missions, how will this impact human health? And this is why Europe has invested in the science of the Gateway. The first two payloads that will fly to the Gateway are radiation payloads and are built by the European Space Agency, of course in cooperation with, again, our colleagues from the Gateway Partnership, and we will share all the data and we will hopefully learn. But it's not only stops there, it also goes to the lunar dust, which as we know is very toxic. We also saw the suits of the Apollo astronauts that were completely gray after their spacewalks. But not only the suits of the astronauts, also imagine that you have a starship landing on the surface of the moon. We have seen just from Firefly, from the smaller engines, all the lunar dust that came up. Let's only imagine with the Raptor engines from the Starship what is going to give. And then this ship is going to come back to the Gateway and talk to the Gateway. How will this contaminate also the long-term environment of the Gateway? So there is a lot of questions that we need to answer still, and this is why we think in Europe that we need to go a stepwise approach. Yes, we are explorers. Yes, there will be risks. Yes, there will be dangers. The astronauts are willing to take that risk. Also, when we sit on top of the rocket, there is also risk associated with that, believe it or not. And we are willing to take that risk, but we want to make sure that everybody does the utmost to minimize those risks. And this is why we need to go step by step. And this is why we need to characterize, first of all, this environment. And this is one of the big steps that we want to do in this phase 1 of our lunar exploration program in ESA.
Is this on? Okay. I'll just add a little bit, and I'll note many of our objectives in the Moon to Mars architecture are literally centered on the human and the human risks of medical, both health and performance. And it isn't just Moon to Mars. The ISS, we have 25 years of testbed activity in the shuttle program before that. So there's a wealth of knowledge, and our human research program is doing exactly that. We have a number of known risks for future exploration, and they have been studying for many years effective countermeasures, right? Some things are about the risk acceptance. What can we accept in terms of exposure to microgravity, but also the rest of it is, can we develop proper countermeasures? So a lot of the research we are doing are in both of those areas. And I'll note, as Frank mentioned, we actually only have 12 people have walked on the moon. The ability to take the crew from microgravity and then operate in a partial gravity environment without any assistance. They are going to land, they are going to get out of their spaceship. No one's there to help them. And when they go to Mars, it will be even harder because they will have been in space for 9 months before they arrive at Mars. So being able to make the crew operate both for high performance and safely for their health throughout the mission are all active research topics today.
Great, thank you. So this next question, given the successes we just heard from both Misaki and Will, maybe you could try to go tackle this one, but what is one thing that you've learned from the recent mission that has challenged your perspective on humanity's return to the moon? Misaki, do you want to start?
Well, it's not a lesson, but it's like a, how do I say, it's like reminder that there are, multiple spots on the surface of the moon and Mars, I think, that we should visit and study intensively before we send astronauts to the moon. So there should be a way of making that multiple visit easier. And I think, pinpoint landing by small lander is the way, but there could be other ideas as well. So yeah, going there more often and more frequently is, is the best way to learn about the environment. So, yeah, we really should think about doing things frequently. Maybe you have an idea as well.
Yeah, I'll just say that I think I really underappreciated the thermal challenge of being at the moon for people specifically. I know we've been there before, but those have all been fairly short duration missions, and just seeing the temperature changes over the course of the day for things we'd never really seen before was pretty humbling. Specifically, there was just a crater nearby us that was magnifying the sun back onto the vehicle, and that hadn't been observed on any of the prior missions. So, that combined with the swings from more than 100 centigrade to less than minus 170 for a long duration mission is just an extraordinary challenge to have to overcome.
Okay. Najud, maybe you can start with this one. What are the long-term aims of inhabiting the moon, and why is it so important that we build a presence there?
It's a great question. I think there's a lot we learn about exploration, which it supports us here on Earth, right? So obviously science, the ability to understand the moon. The moon is a record of our solar system. All of the things that happened to Earth happened on the moon, but without the water cycle, the record's there. So when we learn about the moon, we are really learning about Earth. So the science of it in the particular, but also the technology advancements, the ability to advance our power systems, our human health systems, things like that, that directly feeds back here on Earth in our day-to-day lives. We have so many technologies that were advanced because of the Apollo program and other spaceflight programs today. So those are the sort of the intangible pieces, but I think we all just take the inspiration of exploration and being able to be there and have the crew working. They take humanity along with them. So that is, in broad strokes, right? All of these things are things that resonate for why we explore. And the longer we can stay there, as I mentioned, crew time is our most precious resource. It is very, very difficult to operate in these environments. So the amount of time they have to spend on maintenance or the boring stuff takes away from the advantages of sending humans. So the longer we can send them, the more effective their time there can be. That's the most important thing in building out systems to sustain the presence, to do that research and to develop the technologies that benefit us here on Earth.
Can I give just a specific example of technology coming back to Earth? I think we all take GNSS or GPS for granted. But at the moon, that doesn't exist yet. So we're having to develop new technologies. For us, we use vision navigation to precisely figure out where we are in lunar orbit. And that has applications back on Earth. While we use GNSS all the time, there are GNSS-denied scenarios for the DoD where you need a different solution. And so we've developed it for the moon, but there's a direct application here on Earth.
A quick follow-up. I second what Nujud said already and Bill said as well. So the biggest draw card for Australian industry to get into space has been this spin-off benefits. When I talk about spin-off benefits, I'm not just talking about the applications themselves, but industry finds it interesting because if they're able to prove their technology works in space and on the moon, they can also prove that it's going to work better here on Earth. And they're building processes that make their entire ecosystem better, their supply chain gets better, and their engineering mindset gets better, the systems engineering gets better. So that has been a great spin-off benefit as well.
Great. So this is a pretty open question, so maybe we can hear from all the panelists on it. What do you think humanity's presence on the moon looks like in 2035 and 2035 and 2045? Maybe start with Arvind and come back down this way.
2035, a lot more Australian payloads on the moon. But I would think 2035 would be a time when we establish a permanent settlement on the moon, a permanent settlement that helps us stay longer and do more science for longer. And 2035 would be that. And 2045, I would assume we would have learned how to do that sustainably and ensure that whatever we did wrong here on Earth doesn't continue on the moon. And countries coming together, all the Artemis Accord signatories with their capabilities on the moon together, that would be amazing.
Yeah, I agree. For 2035, persistence should be the goal. 2045, I'm going to be optimistic and say that I hope some people call the moon their home at that point in time.
Well, I like to see astronauts walking small robots on the moon as we walk our dogs in a park today.
I don't know how to follow that. So I hope by 2035, we're seeing regular repeat access through a number of providers, sustained operations, and when I say sustained, that means both crewed and uncrewed, to explore all sorts of regions on the moon and building capabilities. And by 2045, I hope our human presence has extended beyond the moon. And that is ultimately the goal, that we can continue to live and work on the moon and continue to explore further into the solar system.
Thanks, Nujut. As mentioned also on our view graph, by 2035, we hope to have Europeans on the moon as well. Probably not permanently, but like we now visit the ISS from time to time, that's certainly a goal for Europe. And then this, in my view, will still be probably shorter missions. But then by 2045, when I look to Jason and say, well, permanently having people living permanently on the moon, I hope that we have this permanent presence on the moon as of 2045.
All right, I think we have time for one more question. What advice do you have for entrepreneurs looking to contribute to the space industry beyond low Earth orbit? And maybe we can start with Will.
I'll say that beyond low Earth orbit, it's a very difficult industry to be competitive in. But I think the first thing is just to have something that you're passionate about, and if you're passionate about it, you can often find some commercial case, some use case for it, and then find others who share that passion, and I think you can make it happen.
Okay. Any other panelists want to add to that?
I'll add, I mean, I think the challenges from low Earth orbit to the moon to Mars are each an order of magnitude harder than the one before. And I think the advantage for anyone looking to explore in these more challenging regions is to be very clear about what your capabilities are, your niche area, and be good at that. Because it is very, very hard. And so to be good at everything is very unlikely, and that is what, you're watering out your capabilities. It becomes very difficult. So, be clear about your strategic value to a larger ecosystem, because it's an all of us effort to explore, not a one of us.
Second, Will, and examples from the programs that we run in Australia. The virtual reality tools for astronaut training that were developed by a private company called Ray Tracer, they are now being used in a big Australian supermarket chain called Coles and Woolworths for various applications. Who would imagine that, right? So I think continuing down the path of innovating and ensuring that your processes are good and your systems are good will find good customers on terrestrial applications.
Great. All right. And thank you all for your perspectives and answering the questions from the audience. So in closing, the name of the session was Learning to Live on Another World and Humanity's Return to the Moon. So we've heard a lot about plans from agencies and industries in terms of living on the moon. So I want to focus a little bit on what that means for the international community's return to the moon. And so I want to start with this image here. This is an image that was taken by the HiRISE camera on the Mars Reconnaissance Orbiter from Mars. So this is 140 million kilometers away of our home and the moon. And images like this, of course, are iconic, but the thing that really strikes me about this image is the date on there. This was October 3rd, 2007. And some people in this room, maybe, will remember that that's the same day that the JAXA Selene mission entered its initial lunar orbit. And so in the time since Selene, it was closely followed by Chang'e-1 and Chandrayaan-1, and then the venerable Lunar Reconnaissance Orbiter, which remains operational to this day. We've had a continuous robotic presence at the moon. So we had a spacecraft orbiting Mars, taking a picture of the Earth-Moon system, capturing this foundation event in lunar exploration. So when we talk about international community returning to the moon, we've already demonstrated we can do this robotically, and the next step is to do it with humans as well. So these international missions demonstrated the collaboration between nations. Many of them had hosted payloads from international partners. Many of them shared their data openly, and many of them sponsored rigorous scientific scientific discourse that changed the way that we view the moon. In terms of the data they collected, they have collected the critical data that we need to send humans to the moon again. But beyond that, they're also serving to inspire. And if you're a fan of the images that come back from the Lunar Reconnaissance Orbiter, there's these special types of images that the camera takes called oblique views, where they actually slew the spacecraft over and give this astronaut's perspective of the moon. So this is Tycho crater on the near side. It's something that you can see with your naked eyes on the near side southern portion. It has a 100 meter sized boulder at the top of its central peak, and we don't know how it got there. But showing images like this to the public serve as a way of taking the moon from being this dull gray disk high in the sky to a fully realized world that we have explored and we're going to continue to explore. So the international community is ready to return to the moon, and they're going to do it together. When we do go back, we want to make sure that we're doing it with everyone. So I'm a lunar scientist, and because of this renaissance in lunar exploration that's happened, it's greatly benefited my career. If you're in this room, you probably have also had the privilege of benefiting from these wonderful data sets that the missions have provided. Because of that, we owe a debt to the public that we need to communicate with them often and clearly the importance of lunar exploration in terms of humanity's goals of expanding into the cosmos. So a lot of this happens at the local level, at institution level, maybe regional, maybe national level, but there are also global events that allow us to celebrate the moon and engage the community. One of them is International Moon Day. It happens every July, on July 20th, the anniversary of the Apollo 11 landing. There's also International Observe the Moon Night, which happens in late September or early October. International Observe the Moon Night is this Saturday. So I encourage you, while you're here, especially if you've traveled from the Northern Hemisphere, to go out and look up and get that different perspective on the moon. It actually is pretty moving. But we do need to do more than that. And I do want to highlight, this is my final slide, that there is an international collaboration that's happening. They're seeking endorsements in order to host the International Lunar Year around the year 2028. And the goal of this is to bring the international community together and do things that aren't possible on a unilateral basis, to create the new laws and treaties that will enable safety and sustainability, to have the communities work together across academia, science, industry, and government, and of course to raise public engagement. So if you are at this meeting and you're interested in becoming part of this effort, I encourage you to email the International Lunar Year at gmail.com. And so with that, I'm going to close this session. I would like to thank you all for participating, and please join me in thanking our panelists for their thoughts as well.